Our reading today comes from Maria Mitchell, who was a 19th century Unitarian and astronomer. She writes, "Small as is our whole system compared with the infinitude of creation, brief as is our life compared with cycles of time, we are so tethered to all by the beautiful dependencies of law that not only the sparrow's fall is felt to the outermost bound, but the vibrations set in motion by the words that we utter reach through all space, and the tremor is felt through all time." Setting the stage for the sermon today. In the area of Georgia where I used to live, there seemed to be an endless amount of bumper stickers that read, "Made for More." They were apparently given out by a local megachurch, but it appeared to be a part of a larger movement in the Christian faith meant to inspire people to think more deeply about the purpose of their life. Obviously, being immune to such mysterious marketing campaigns like this, I immediately began to spiral into a deep existential crisis the first time I saw them, wondering, what indeed was I made for? What is the meaning of our lives? Why are we here floating on this big blue boat with billions of other people also wondering why they're here? Who or what could provide us with the answers we need most? So I went on a bit of a journey, and I'd like to take you along, just in case you too were wondering what the meaning of life is. I figured everyone usually starts in the highest places when asking this question. So in a stroke of assumed genius, I asked my 5-year-old what the meaning of life was. When she said she didn't know what I meant by it, I clarified, saying, "Why are we alive?" She became quiet and appeared to think deeply about an answer. I was convinced she was the tiny Buddha I needed, and her answers would be inevitably insightful and profound. Several seconds later, she said very proudly, "Because we eat." Seems to be a thread today. A pragmatic response indeed, but it didn't help me come to any conclusions beyond the fact that I was overdue for lunch. So I turned my search to literature. Surely this subject is tackled adeptly in many classic novels, but I decided to look in something with a bit of grandeur, something we just watched. In The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I found, just like we did in our Time for All Ages this morning, that the ultimate answer to life, the universe, and everything is 42. 42, of course. A brilliant answer. I thought as 42 is 101010 in binary code, and light refracts off water by 42 degrees to create the rainbow, and light requires 10 to 42 seconds to cross the diameter of a proton. But as soon as I began to feel content with the universal answer, I found that the author, Douglas Adams, admitted it was not but a farce. He said, "It was a joke. It had to be a number, an ordinary smallish number, and I chose that one. Binary representations, base 13, Tibetan monks are all complete nonsense." I sat at my desk, stared out into my garden, and thought, 42 will do. I typed it out, end of story. Heavy sigh. Alas, wrong again. I went on in my search. Surely there must be answers amongst our world's religions. I soon found the meaning of life varied from faith to faith. I began my search with some of our newest religions. In Scientology, founded in 1954, I read that the meaning of life was tied to the goal of becoming an operating thetan. Apparently, this meant that I could reach a state in which I could create my own universe, move objects and control people with my mind, and have no need for a body or our universe anymore. Sounds pretty cool, but I like having a body to eat mashed potatoes with, so I decided to move on. In Mormonism, which began in 1830, the reason we are on earth is to pass a test. Each difficulty we face, be it an illness, a trauma, or loss, is a test by God to discern his, their gender assignment, not mine, purpose for us, and to make him proud. I've never been particularly good at taking tests, so I also had to move along from this. For Islam, which began in 610 CE, the meaning of life is abada, or to worship or please God through obedience. The Quran says, "In the creation of the heavens and the earth and the alternation of the night and the day, there are surely signs for all who are endowed with insight, who remember God when they stand and when they sit and when they lie down to sleep and reflect on the creation of the heavens and the earth. O our Lord, you have not created this without meaning and purpose. Limitless art you in your glory." End quote. A beautiful way to describe it, that seeking, that purpose. But I know I can't be the only one in this congregation who hears the word obedience and shudders. Let's move on. On to Christianity, founded in, you guessed it, the first century of our common era. For insight into this faith's meaning of life, I turned to the most obvious place, mega church pastor and author Rick Warren, who says there are 5 reasons why people are on earth. He was kind enough to share them with those of us still unenlightened. He says we are here firstly for God's pleasure, then for God's family, then to become like Christ, to serve God, and lastly for a mission. The mission is apparently top secret. I'm not privy to those details, but that's where that ended. I just feel as though this leads to more questions rather than illuminating the answers. Like, why would a God create life for its own entertainment? And what if you come to the end of your life and die and there's no God and you've spent your life centered around pleasing something that isn't real? Do you see how I spiraled, folks? And then what if there is a God, but it actually doesn't care about what you do with your life? Or worse yet, there's a God and it's no, you've got it all wrong. I actually wanted you to do the exact opposite of everything that you did. You were paying attention to the wrong parts of the book. I joke, of course, but seriously, even behaving in a Christ-like manner is complicated by the numerous times throughout history that we've seen leaders proclaim the gospel while doing the most un-Christ-like things imaginable. There may be something here, but let's continue our journey. On to Buddhism, which began in the 6th century BCE. In Buddhism, the meaning of life is simply to end suffering. We do this by ending the cycle of reincarnation through reaching enlightenment. This seems difficult, and according to some sects of Buddhism, it's reserved for only the most disciplined and monastic Buddhists. And as much as I can appreciate silence after an hour of my children screaming about not getting their way, monasticism simply isn't my personal thing, so I moved on. On to Judaism. Founded roughly 2000 BCE, just like in Christianity, there are many different sects, but for Reconstructionists and many others, the meaning of life is to embody Torah, the living word of the living God. In other words, it means to live out your belief. To obey God's commandments is to embody the Torah, and I really like the idea of living out your faith. But again with that obey word, and that question of God again. So what of Hinduism, which began in 2300 BCE? The purpose of life for Hindus is fourfold: to achieve dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. Or to simplify these terms, acting virtuously, pursuing prosperity, obtaining enjoyment, and finally, enlightenment, which is ultimately unity with God. I read this and I felt like I was getting a little bit closer for me personally. Dharma, acting virtuously, seemed like a worthy goal of life. Pursuing prosperity, maybe? I'd always been told that prosperity was more like icing on the cake. So fickle, it's not something you can be guaranteed no matter how hard you work. So I assumed I could count that out for my personal meaning of life. But enough of world religions. What of science? Michio Kaku, a theoretical physicist and author, says, "Beyond work and love, I would add 2 other ingredients that give meaning to life. First, to fulfill whatever talents we are born with. However blessed we are by fate with different abilities and strengths, we should try to develop them to their fullest, rather than allow them to atrophy and decay. Second, we should try to leave the world a better place than when we entered it. As individuals, we can make a difference, whether it's to probe the secrets of nature, to clean up the environment, and work for peace and social justice, or to nurture the inquisitive, vibrant spirit of the young by being a mentor and a guide? I knew I could count on science for a quality answer. I was content to stop here, but thought I'd venture on just for the fun of it. I wanted to know what our culture says is the purpose of our lives, so I turned on my TV. You're already hip to the vibe, I get it. It took me only a few minutes before finding the answer. Convenience and consumption were clearly the key to happiness, and happiness was obviously the ultimate meaning of life, according to our society. Happiness was there. There was something there to that. After all, it feels good to be happy. And shouldn't we strive to feel good as often as we can? Isn't feeling good worth working towards? The answer felt right, but in that way that seems to be because I've heard it so frequently. Surely the meaning of life isn't so capricious as happiness. If the scientific answer of purpose and leaving the world better than I found it felt right, then how does happiness play into that? Are we confusing happiness with contentedness, with fulfillment, with purpose? I needed more confirmation for this, and so I went to my go-to source of wisdom, mommy blogs. You know, the online communities made for mothers where you can ask things like, what is this weird rash? And how do you make your own organic gluten-free baby food? And is my child the next Einstein? Which the answer is always, of course. I found a surprisingly profound answer to my question of whether happiness was a worthy goal. The author of the article was Kathy Shalhoub, and she writes, "My ultimate objective as a parent is not to make my kids happy. It's to see them fulfilled. Happiness will be the occasional side effect. But happiness is a fickle thing, and seeking constant happiness is just as numbing as none at all. When I focus so intently on creating happy kids, I am implicitly teaching them that anytime they're not happy, life is bad. What I want for my kids is to experience love in both its waxing and waning phases. I want them to overcome challenges with intelligence and grace. I want them to adventure through their hearts and minds, uncovering more exquisite treasure within them at every turn. I want them to live in lifelong curiosity, to hunger for knowledge, to thirst for experience. I want them to be rooted in empathy and compassion for the world around them. I want them to be kind and generous, full of humanity. I want them to make a palpable difference in the lives they cross. I want them to believe in who they are and the power of their tiniest contributions. I want them to be confident. I want them to meet fear often and to find courage on occasion, because that means they're working outside constant comfort and security. I want them to explode with ideas and creativity, to explore, to experiment with whatever they can get their hands and minds on. I want them to take risks, to fall, to fail, and to learn what it is to stand up again with scrapes on their knees and scars on their hearts. I want them to believe in the healing power of again or next time. I want my kids to be secure enough in themselves to go hunting when they're hungry and be big enough to share the catch when they make it. I want all of these things for my kids, and most of them don't come with the irrationality and flightiness of happiness." End quote. Well, I'll be darned if a mommy blog didn't come through for me once again. It may have been speaking about children, but the goals she outlines are universal. They apply to no matter our ages. While there were a lot of great ideas in her piece, the overall theme was purpose, to not give up until you learn what the purpose is, and then to have the courage to live it out in this world unapologetically. So by this point in our journey of discovery, we have covered family responses, literature, a fair amount of the most predominant world religions, as well as our culture. So what's left? Yes, Unitarian Universalism. I was nervous when researching this last bit. Would it line up with the thoughtful reflections from Kathy Shalhoub? Would it make as much sense as Kaku's answer? Had I invested my life's work into an institution that would let me down on the question that mattered most in our world? Now, this is where any good television show would cut to commercial, so I'm just going to take a little sip of water right now. Let you sweat it out a bit. All was well once I came across a passage from Universalist preacher John Murray. Historically, this passage is actually attributed to Murray, but it was actually written by one of his biographers, Alfred S. Cole. It reads, "Go out into the highways and byways. Give people something of your vision. You may possess a small light, but uncover it. Let it shine. Use it to bring more light and understanding to the hearts and minds of men and women and all ad people. Give them not hell, but hope and courage. Preach the kindness and everlasting love of God." Now, whether you believe in the kindness and everlasting love of God, there is certainly something to be considered here. Let your light shine. Bring your light to others. Give them hope and courage. Yes, this feels like a worthy way to spend a lifetime. It feels full of purpose. And so 3 crucial pieces of my identity finally merged: the rational, scientific side, the religious side, and the mommy side, to provide me with my own meaning of life. Find my purpose, live it out, be of use, give people hope, and do good in this world. What has your journey of discovery been? And what, if anything, is your answer to this ultimate question? I'm sorry if I burst your bubble about number 42. Amen. May it be so, and blessed be.